Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Pitney. I'm the founder of Launch My Book, and this is the latest in our author expert series. I am thrilled today to have Anne MacDonald with us. I met Anne at the Independent Book Publishers Association conference in Denver a few weeks ago, and we really hit it off. And I learned a bunch about her that I wanted to share with everybody here. Anne is a published author. She can tell us a little bit more about her books. And she also is the associate editor at Indigo River Publishing, and she just finished a stint as the acquisitions director as well at the Indigo River Publishing. That's a small publishing company based in Pensacola, Florida, which is where she's also based, and where she's joining us from today. And I wanted to talk to Anne about all things books and writing. She's doing a ton of stuff. She's written books. She helps people get book deals. She coaches people about books. She podcasts about books. She has an AI company that's all about books. So she's got a lot to share with everybody. So welcome, Anne.
Jack of all trades. Thank you.
Yeah, Jill of all trades, right? Yeah. Um, yeah, so I think I just want to dive right in. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your journey as an author?
Yeah. So 5 years ago, I published my first book, A Lost Woman. And the big joke with that book is it took me 4 years to get published and 9 months for my book to go out of print. So basically, learned a lot of things with that book, made a lot of mistakes, like I think a lot of authors do.
Mhm.
And at the time that that book went out of print, I had actually self-published my second book already and started working with Indigo River Publishing. So I really was just diving into this publishing world because I wanted to learn as much as I could about it. And I really wanted to make it be a successful author. And to me, that meant learning the business as much as I could, because I was literally that author that after I finished my first book, I Googled, how do you publish a book? I had zero idea of what it would entail, and how writing that book was just step one in a very long process to reaching my goals.
Mm, mm. So, if you could share two of the biggest mistakes that you made and learned from that initial foray into publishing, what would they be?
The biggest mistake I made with my first book was not vetting the publishing company that offered me the deal. If I had known how to vet that company and ensure that that company was going to be able to give me what I needed to be successful as an author, I would not have signed with that author. And unfortunately, because I signed with that publishing company and it didn't work out, that book was dead in the water. And I lost years, trying to get that book out and get that book together with the wrong company. I hear a lot of this with authors too, with agents, just signing an agent because it's the first agent that said yes to you, because sometimes that can be really hard to get. But then that agent wasn't a fit for you. And so you're wasting time with that person, kind of like a relationship.
Mhm.
Make sure it's a good fit, because otherwise you're going to waste a lot of time and you're not going to reach the goals you want to reach.
Mm.
Um, the other biggest mistake I made is thinking that the publisher was going to do everything for me, thinking that, oh, I've got this publisher, they're going to market the book, they're going to get the book in stores, I'm going to just become a bestseller, right? That's how that works.
Mhm.
No, that is not how it works. And so I've learned so much about how to market your book, how to gain success as an author, what authors really need to be doing, and so much is on us as authors to get that done. Publishing companies, they're all about putting that book out there. They're not, but if you're not a lead author, there's not really a lot of support with selling that book.
Right. So when you say lead author, you mean within a publishing company, they're going to have a whole suite of books they're publishing, and there's going to be the top titles with the people
Yes.
with the big names they're really going to push, and then there's kind of everybody else who get deals but maybe don't get a lot of their attention. Is that right?
Yes, and I think it directly correlates to the level of deal you get from that publishing company. Like, if you are getting an advance and it's a six-figure advance, that publishing company has a lot of money behind you, and they're going to put more behind that book. They're saying, we really think this book is going to be successful, so we're willing to put our marketing company behind it. We're willing to put kind of the best editors, the best designers. We're willing to give you a book tour and get you set up on that. if you get at like a 5-figure deal, they're like, maybe you'll be okay. So you gotta like weigh and measure that too. When if you are receiving an advance and an offer from a publishing company, really look at what that offer, that level of author, because that sometimes directly correlates to the level of support that publishing company is willing to give you.
Hmm. Hmm. That's great advice. So, okay, so that you then got a job working with Indigo River Publishing, and I'd love to know a little bit more about your role as an acquisitions director and kind of what that entails, and what you look for when you're trying to get new titles.
Yeah. So what I really loved about Indigo River when I got on is it is a smaller company. Despite the fact that we have hundreds and hundreds of titles because we've been around for a long time, they really do keep their company small and really tight knit, which is just lovely. Which has allowed me to kind of move freely through the publishing company with different positions because of that. But it allows me also to, during that acquisitions process, to be very personalized with the authors, which is something that I fell in love with the most about acquisitions, is being able to talk to authors on the other side, because I'd always been on that side of, will you talk to me? Do you like me? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Like, just somebody talk to me, please. There's so much closed
Yeah.
doors with publishing. So to be able to learn in that position and then open those doors for author was huge for me. So I was on calls constantly with authors talking to them about, hey, I see so much potential in your book, but maybe you should do A and B also too. And then we'd see
Mm,
more potential, or we'd be able to offer you a deal or something like that.
mm,
So just having the freedom to really personalize that entire acquisitions process was something I really enjoyed having the opportunity to do, because a lot of times that's not really a personal space for authors. They just get those form rejections and there's no real explanation. And I also learned how to write a query and how not to write a query. You
mm.
learn how to treat people versus how not to treat people. All that's anything under the sun happened to me. I mean, yelled at on the phone sometimes, or sent blistering email after blistering email just because I didn't like your book or I didn't think it was a fit for us. I meet a lot of authors who think that their book is absolutely perfect. I don't
Mm,
need editing. My book is absolutely perfect. I
mm,
don't want you to change a thing. If you think that, then you should self-publish, because no publisher is going to accept your book as is,
mm.
unless they're a vanity press and you're paying them to do it and they're just accepting it. And a good way, by the way, to point out a vanity press is they accept you and agree to publish you without ever even reading your book. That's like the number one like red flag of, I am working with vanity press, and I don't think vanity presses are bad. I think that it's self-publishing assistance, in all honestly. And then
Yeah.
you also have kind of the name of a publisher behind you if that's something you really want. I really am a big believer of whatever space you want to publish in, self, hybrid, vanity, traditional, author centric is now a big thing. Like any of the things that come up, I think that there's room for all different types of publishing. And based on your goals as an author, that kind of really can dictate what type of publishing is best for you.
Right. No, that's so interesting. And there's so much in what you said. And I want to go back to a couple things, kind of tease them apart. But one, you said this thing about a lot of times authors will come to you and they do not want to have their book edited or changed, think it's perfect, etc. And I talk to so many people all the time who hear that traditional publishers, if they get a traditional publishing deal, they're going to take away creative control and they're going to change everything, and they get really afraid of that. And people say, "Oh, well, I don't even want to do that." So they end up self-publishing, right? Like you said. But what I find, and I've worked with traditional publishers as a writer. I'm a ghostwriter. So I've written books for people and that have been traditionally published. I have almost never had a bad experience with the acquisitions editor from the publisher. Their feedback has almost always been helpful to developing the manuscript. And so I sometimes think that people's fears about the input from the publisher are a little bit overwrought.
I
Uh,
agree. Yeah. The only thing that I see with signing with a traditional publisher like I did. I initially received some amazing feedback from the editor that was working on my book. I tweaked the book, I changed it, I submitted it back, and then never heard anything. And then all of a sudden it was like, here's your publication date. And I was like, what, wait a minute. Well, how did that last edit go? Like, are you sure the book? Of course, author, as I'm the author, that's my book is never ready type of author. So it's like going to take me forever to publish. But I was like, are you sure it's ready? It came out, it had some errors in the book. It was clearly, there was a name change halfway through the book that nobody picked up on, except my mother-in-law, thank you. And she also picked up on the 9 errors too. I was like, I definitely should have had her read the book before it got published. So when the book came out, I was very disappointed with the level of editing I received from that publishing company.
Hmm.
But I never felt like I was excluded. I just felt like there were points where I wasn't included and I didn't know enough to ask to be included. I've talked with a lot of authors too. Some have had bad experiences and felt like they weren't connected with their publisher at all, and their publisher was just kind of doing stuff and they weren't in the room basically when all these decisions were being made and happening, versus authors that even have worked with the big five and said they were extremely collaborative with me. um, and so I think it's just based on on different experiences with different publishers. And then also as an author, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to say, I get that you gave me advance and you have the rights for this book and all that stuff, but like I'm still a part of this too, and kind of push that a little bit. And I think something that really helps authors stay involved is honestly your literary agent. If you have a really good agent, that agent is going to make sure that you are not pushed off to the side. So those kind of things can help.
That's great. And on that topic of literary agents, I wanted to ask you, as an acquisitions director, how often, how necessary do you feel it is that someone is coming to you with an agent versus going directly to you without an agent?
So with small publishers like Indigo River that do not offer advances, these publishing houses very rarely work with literary agents because literary agents want to get paid. And if you're not getting an advance, they don't get paid. Now, I have met at the conference, I met some wonderful agents who were like, no, we're totally open, because sometimes that is the best space for our author to be in, is to work with a smaller press. So I was really excited to meet some agents that were interested in that, because a lot of the agents I've worked with are like, well, we're only coming if you're able to offer an advance. We're just not able to do that as a small press, so it's just not going to happen for us. But the big benefits I see with having a literary agent, it's basically, there's phase one, which is basically like you hire a lawyer to like help you understand stuff, because these publishing companies are offering you very legal documents. And if you don't understand what you're signing and you're just signing because you're just so excited to get a deal, case in point,
Mhm.
you don't read the fine print, nor do you understand it if you do try to read it.
Mhm.
And you end up getting yourself in a really bad situation sometimes, to where you you could have success with your book in one space, but now that publisher is blocking that success.
Mhm.
And so you really just want to make sure that legally you understand who has what rights and who can do what with the book and all that. Back payments of royalty. Any book I sold on my own, I had to back in royalties to my publisher. I was like, say what now? I was not happy about that one. But I didn't, I just signed because I was just so excited, right? I did have a friend of mine who was a lawyer that kind of looked at it for me, but she wasn't in the publishing space. So she did help me negotiate a few things with that contract. But overall, it was very heavy in favor of the publisher and not the author. So literary agents, I think, really help on that aspect to begin with. And then if you have a really good literary agent, it's not just about selling this one book and getting this one book published. It's about having somebody who's helping you establish a career. You know,
Mhm.
what are the next steps? What opportunities should you be taking advantage of? Things that you think your publisher is going to do for you,
Mhm.
but that's your literary agent. And so think of it like a talent agent. Same thing. Like, if you're out in Hollywood, you're an actress, the director and producer of that movie cares about that one movie with you. They don't care about your career. That's your talent agent. So that's kind of where a literary agent can be extremely helpful for an author.
Mhm. That's great. Thank you for that. That's helpful. And so from the perspective of an acquisitions director, right, at a small publisher, what are some core pieces of advice you would give authors who are reaching out to pitch their books to you?
You hear this all the time, but it rings true because it happens so often. Be professional. Like,
Mm,
send me a professional query. If
mm,
I'm getting a professional query, I know, okay, this person at least halfway understands the writing world. If you just send me your full document and you say, here's my book, I'd like to be considered for publication. Well, yeah, I got that. Um, you're gonna have to give me a little bit more. So there is, queries in the publishing world are extremely formulaic, and there is a certain way you're supposed to write them. There's a reason you write them that way. And if you want a literary agent and you want a good publisher that's worth their salt, you need to write a professional query.
mm,
That is just step one out the gate. And I actually, Joel, I know we're going to kind of talk about this later, but that's something that my AI program and
mm,
company that I'm launching, Parlexi, helps authors do, is write a very good, solid query that's up to professional standards.
mm. That's great. So as an acquisitions director, you get emails, I assume, or submissions to the website that have query letters on them. Do you read everything?
So I read every query, yes.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
do I
Yeah, yeah.
read every book? No.
Right.
You can tell, and there is a reason people only ask for the first 10 pages. I thought, gosh, that's so limiting. But
Yeah.
then in a couple of sentences, sometimes you can tell, like, the first thing I look for is in that query letter, it lets me know, is your story even halfway interesting? Does it fit with our catalog? Is it interesting at all? Am I intrigued?
Mm,
Yes. Okay, now let me go look at that document. I'm
mm,
looking at the document, and really the first thing I'm looking for in that document is, can you even write? Like, do you have the basic writing skills that are necessary to publish and be an author? You'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen. People are submitting books, and then those are always, not to poke fun, but those are always the people who are like, "Oh, my book's perfect," and I'm like, "No, not
yeah.
even. You didn't even get close to the mark, buddy." You know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so that's something that, right out the gate when I'm just looking through those first couple of pages is, does this person have the writing chops? With Indigo, there's a big saying in acquisitions of, is it good enough to be great? Because if you have the basic skills of writing and your story idea is solid, editing can get you there. I mean, editing is magic, magic. And so, really, when I'm looking at these stories, I don't necessarily need to read the whole book sometimes, because I can just tell from the first couple of pages, we can make this great. We can work with this.
Mm,
Now, bigger publishers and literary agents most likely are going to read your entire book and they're going to comb through it, because there's a lot more that goes into to a literary agent working with you and getting that advance and getting that bigger publisher.
right.
There's a lot more that has to be there, because it has to be a really well put together manuscript for a big publishing company to accept it.
Hmm. Well, so that's great, and I love that editing is magic. I think that's amazing, and I love that you can figure that out so quickly. Whether it's a good fit and whether or not there's some talent there. One question I have that I hear often, and I've had this experience directly working, developing book proposals and pitching agents and pitching publishers, is the importance of platform. Um, and how much, and I know it's different for every publisher, and I know it's different for different genres, but how much, when you're looking at a story, say, hey, look, this story is good and it could be great. It's a fit for our catalog. This person's a good writer. They've done the query letter right. I'm interested.
Yeah.
How much do you care about the author's platform, or are you willing to work with a book that is well executed and has a lot of potential, but maybe the author has literally no platform whatsoever?
And that's the hard thing, because with smaller independent presses, if you don't come with a platform or a plan or a marketing strategy for your book to sell your book, a
Mm,
lot of smaller publishing houses and independent publishing houses are not going to have that. They're not going to have a marketing department for you. they're going to have distribution, but that's going to be as far as they can go. And so in order for them to take the chance on you, you've got to bring something to the table. And a lot of times that is platform. And it's heartbreaking to me because I go out there and I see so many agents and so many people saying, you don't need a platform. You really, really don't need a platform as an author. But in some cases you do. Now,
Mm.
you have a great story. You're absolutely fabulous. You get a literary agent who is worth their salt. They sell it to a big five publisher, zero platform. I've seen first-time authors get these deals and have zero platform to work off of.
Mm.
But what that publisher is doing is for every one really mega book they accept and they know is going to make them a ton of money, those lead authors, they'll take 10 other books that they're just taking a chance on. Like maybe it'll work, maybe it doesn't. Maybe we lose 10 grand on that book, maybe we lose 50 grand on that book. Doesn't really matter. We earned 5 million on this other book. So we're fine. You know, small publishing companies can't do that though. And so that's where sometimes, a lot of times, these smaller companies, it could be even harder to get a publishing deal with them because it's harder for them to take a chance on an author who comes without a platform or comes without some kind of marketing plan and strategy.
Interesting. No, that's very interesting. It's a little counterintuitive, right?
I know,
Um,
and you would think it's backwards, but
yeah. Well, I like that you pointed to this thing because, you talked about how there's a lot of people out there saying you don't necessarily need it. And I I encounter that sort of dynamic with so many things in the book industry. People will say things, and there's lots of people saying things, and there might be some example of how it's true, but for most people, it's
Mhm.
not true. And so what I'm hearing you saying is that probably if you want to get a publishing deal with a small press or a big press, you should err on the side of having a platform and a marketing plan
Yeah.
because you're probably not going to be the exception to the rule.
No, and that's the thing. There's unicorns out there, and I feel like the writing world highlights these unicorns as if they're the norm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, that is not the normal. That is not how that really works.
Yeah. No, it's funny how that works. So when you're looking for a platform, what are you looking for? Specifically, what kind of what are some of the things you want to see?
So specifically with Indigo River Publishing, we do a lot of nonfiction books. And
Mhm.
so when we're looking to work with an author in the nonfiction space, we're looking at, do they have a speaking career that they've already launched, or do they plan to launch a speaking career? How connected is their business? What level of platform does necessarily your business have? Maybe not you as the author. Are you a thought leader in this space to where a lot of people care about what you have to say? Are you having such extreme wild success? You've come up with this new formula of how to market, Coke, and now everybody wants to know how did you have that success?
Mhm.
Okay, yes, this book is going to be huge because everybody cares what you're saying.
Mhm.
So there's that space. And then in the fiction space, I follow a lot of people on social media. I'm not very active personally per se on social media, but I do some scrolling.
You're not an
And
active content creator, but you're an active content consumer.
yes,
Yeah.
because I like to see what everybody else is doing. And I keep telling myself I'm going to do it too. And then I just never have time to do it because social media is extremely time consuming, as we all know. But I saw this author go from zero platform to, she's got over 50,000 followers now. And I mean, it's been very quick. And her whole platform is, let's be real. You don't have to read 20,000 books a year to be a book influencer. Let's be real, writers. You don't have to write 50 pages a day to be considered a real writer. Like,
Mm.
it's just kind of like this raw and honest, like, Instagram brand that she's created. This chick's getting a book deal.
Mm.
Whenever she actually does put her book out,
Mhm.
just the fact that she has followers and all these people following her, she's getting a good book deal, right? I saw another author who just kind of went every day. She posts something about funny, and it's really hysterical, like her writing. Like, she'll be writing something and she's like, what I'm really thinking when I'm writing, or what I wish I was doing instead of writing, or like just these like fun quirky things that she does throughout the day writing. She
Yeah.
just got a huge book deal as a first time author. So a lot of times, though, with Indigo, like when we're looking at the platform, if let's say I'm a mom and I saw this the other day. She's a middle school teacher and she dances on TikTok. I mean, who doesn't, right? she's got a huge following. Millions and millions of viewers view her dances because she's kind of funny. Now, let's say she puts a book together about education. That following really doesn't mean much because the people who
Right.
follow her to watch her dance and be funny aren't going to buy an educational book from her. So you've got to think about that too. If you're like, okay, I've got to develop a platform as an author to then turn around and sell my book successfully, make sure that platform has a level of crossover and connection with what your actual book is going to be selling.
Right. Well, so that's a very fascinating question. It's one that, because part of what my company does is we do different types of marketing, and we definitely do social media stuff. And over the years, we have found that when we're growing social media platforms for an author, and a lot of the social media platform building we do is for authors who are trying to grow a platform because their literary agent told them they needed it in order to sell it to a publisher, right? And we have had so much more success with nonfiction books because there's more to talk about that's relevant to their book. They can get
Yeah.
on, they can write blog posts, they can do podcasts, they can create all kinds of, Facebook and Instagram content about the ideas. If they have a cool approach to parenting, they can be giving advice all the time on social media and writing about it and talking about it. And then people are interested in their ideas. And then when it's time to sell the book, they're like, oh, and by the way, all my ideas are in this book, right? Uh,
Yes.
But it's very interesting with fiction. We've had a much harder time, and it's because we found what you're saying, that the two examples you gave are fiction authors who aren't talking about their book, they're talking about being a writer.
Yeah.
They're
So all
talking
their followers are writers, not necessarily readers. So then
and
it's
I
like,
so I always wonder about that. And there's definitely some overlap there. And a lot of the people that we work with, they don't necessarily want to talk about writing. They want to talk about their book and their ideas. But if you just sit there and talk about your fiction novel over and over and over again, it's going to be hard to grow a following. So
yeah.
I'm curious if you have any thoughts on particularly that fiction side.
So what I have seen really taking off is like movie trailers.
Okay.
So, and this is, again, I'm kind of revealing a lot about what I follow. So I follow some spicy authors, just because spicy authors have a really good marketing tool because they can put together some really intriguing little videos with like some, hot people, and everyone just like gobbles it up like candy. Um, there's this one, she's doing like this hockey theme, and it's like this woman's dating the hockey player, and the relationship that ensues from that. And so she's just like randomly always posting like pictures of what the characters could be, little videos and scenes from the book of how it would play out if it was in a movie. One of our authors, DL Jennings, who's a fabulous fantasy author, if you follow him on Instagram, he puts his characters up there, and it's like these graphics of his characters, and it's like, this is Gorgon the Excellent, and like in his home, and these are the things he loves. Like, so you can kind of play around with it like that and assume that the people following you love your story and your characters. They don't really care about you so much.
Mhm.
If you make it about the story and the characters, that could potentially really, even if you don't build as big of a following, at least the following that you've built is very interested in your stories.
Hmm. Interesting. So you have to be a little more creative.
Definitely.
Hmm.
Definitely. It's a lot. I think, like you said, it's a lot harder to do that as a fiction author. I almost wonder, and you'd probably be the expert on this, I almost wonder if instead of building a follower, it would be better to build relationship with bookstagrammers who are like, hey, I've got these 5 bookstagrammers who will always support my books, and each one of
Yep.
their platforms are worth this. So that's huge.
That's literally what we've done. After trying over and over and over again for the last 5 years to try and build native audiences about fiction books without much success, we
Mhm.
finally just started doing basically book tours to bookstagrammers, book talkers, YouTube reviewers, and using their audience, which they have built because their audience loves to hear their thoughts on the latest book. So that's
Yes.
exactly what we've done.
Yeah.
In terms of building native and that's a thing that you can put that in a marketing plan when you're submitting your query, right? But you
Yes.
don't have, even when you don't have numbers to show big
Yeah.
follow numbers, right?
Yeah, and that's always to authors too, because when we're vetting them for offers with Indigo, I'm like, don't just consider yourself solo here. Like, do you have connections? Do you know, we've had people that we've signed because locally they've had a lot of, they've been the mayor. Okay. Well, you don't really have an Instagram that's supporting the fact that you know everybody in that town
Mm.
and you're the mayor. And so people are just going to buy your book because you were the mayor and you came out with a book. Like,
Right.
sometimes there's like enough of a space there too. So you sometimes can think outside of the box and think about, okay, well, who do I potentially know that I could piggyback off their platform? Or sometimes we have an author who is writing a fictionalized retelling of the Cambridge situation, back in the original election a few years ago. Well,
Mhm.
here we are in an election year. And so it's like, oh, well, if we get this book out now, we can piggyback off of all of that election stuff with
Mm.
this book. And that can really help support the marketing of this book. So sometimes it's even just your ability to say, hey, I can connect to this platform or this social, current thing, and that helps support the book.
That's very cool. Well, I mean, what I'm hearing is a hopeful message in here, right?
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people confront because they don't think they have a traditional platform. And then they hear that, well, publishers, small and large alike, need basically require a platform,
Yeah.
regardless of how good their book is. But what I'm hearing you say is that people can think creatively and proactively about what platform they might have that isn't traditional. They can put together thoughtful marketing plans to maybe leverage or grow those platforms. And so not all is lost if you consider yourself to be someone with not enough Instagram followers.
Yes, yes. And there's people out there, agents and publishers that will see the potential as well too. But like you said, like you get that agent, they see the potential, and they're like, hey, we need you to do this though. We
Yeah.
need you to like help us out in order to get the best deal for you. We've got to show the publisher that there is some ability that we already have in our back pocket to sell this book.
Mm.
Because that's kind of what we're looking at too, is okay, as the publisher, just us publishing the book and the bare basics that we do, we'll sell 2,000 books in the first year. Our goal is 5,000 though. So like, can you bring 3,000 to the table? So that sometimes is kind of how that question goes down of, can that author bring 3,000, book buyers to the table? That's what we really need, because we only see ourselves being able to sell 2,000 out of the
Mhm.
five that we're really in a goal with. Speaking of that 5,000 books, like that's our goal for the year. I recently heard from somebody at a big five that if a book sells 5,000 books over the course of its life, they find that successful. And I was like, I don't feel like that's right. Like, I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like it
funny.
should be a lot more.
Well,
But then,
I've always heard 5,000 is sort of like the break even point,
Mhm.
and 15,000 is what a publisher considers to be successful financially, like an actual profit center.
Yes.
That's what I've
Okay.
always.
Yeah. Because I was
Yeah.
like, 5,000 does not seem like over the life of a book. Like,
Right.
that's our goal. Like, that's not my goal as an author. That's not going to get me on a bestseller list. Like,
Right. Right. Yeah,
a
it's
lot
certainly
more than
not.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very cool. So this is what a cool conversation. There's so much that I could ask you and I want to ask you, but I thought maybe we could shift gears a little bit to your AI company because it sounds so cool. So I'd love to hear more about what it is and kind of the mission behind it, and then maybe some of the stuff that it does.
Yeah, so Parlexi's mission is to be an author's ally. It's a Parlexi author ally. And we eventually plan to grow into publisher ally and agent ally and really kind of expand and just, AI, the big saying is it's not a replacement, it's an enhancement. And so that is really, we've played into that a lot with this program. And it's meant to help authors develop those things that will take a long time to develop successfully. So like I said with the query, there's a formula and there's a certain format that you have to use with writing a professional query. And I spent months learning what that was, participating in webinars, paying for programs, being part of critique groups with, that were specifically just for queries.
Hmm.
months of my life, right? Trying to just get it just right. It's not as easy as you think. And if it's easy, you're probably doing it wrong. So, taking all of my knowledge and putting that into the AI program. So now you answer a series of very strategic questions and that query is generated for you.
Hmm.
Um, Excellent, right? Same with the book blurb. Like, so the blurb you put on the back of your book, that can be the hardest thing sometimes for an author to write. And you don't think so until you sit down and start writing it. And you're like, I just, as the author, you know so much about your book, and there's so much interwoven within your mind with a story to just peel off that very strategic paragraph that's going to hook a reader, but also tell them exactly what your book is going to be about. So it's when they pick it up and they read it and they start reading your book, they don't put it down because it was nothing like they thought it was. You never
Right.
want that. So there's again a formula to how to write a really successful, book blurb, which goes on the back jacket of your book, goes on the description on Amazon, all that stuff. So we've developed something like that too. You answer a strategic set of questions, it spits out that blurb for you. Something that's become extremely popular is pitching, right? Pitch events on Twitter, or you go to book festivals and you're trying to pitch your book to somebody. We were at the conference we were just at, I think it was Eddie who was talking about sometimes all you have is 3 floors in an elevator to pitch your story to someone. And it was funny because I was actually in the elevator with him the night before and I was
Oh,
thinking,
that's funny.
oh, I really need to talk about my book, but what do I say?
Right. Literally the elevator pitch. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And so we've created 2 things for that. We've created the book pitch, which is very much tailored to how you would pitch a book on social media,
Okay.
a quick couple of lines, hashtags, book comps, and stuff like that. Again, when you're doing a Twitter event and you're pitching a book, which these are hugely successful events, by the way, if you're not on Twitter and you don't know about these pitch events, you need to know about them because people are signing with agents extremely frequently, way more frequently than cold querying on these pitch events. And
Oh, wow.
have a pitch event for everything, everything. It,
Mm.
it's an exploration. So go on there and just,
No,
figure
I'm
it out
very
because
intrigued. I
it's
want to
like
go
a
check it
lot.
out. Yeah.
But there's a strategic way to write that pitch, and certain book comps you're going to want to be using because you always need to do a sticky mashup. You
Mhm.
even want to do a mashup when you're doing a query too. It's like, what 2 books make your book, So it's
Mhm.
like you want to know that. Like mine's Gone Girl meets Where the Crawdads Sing. And so it kind of gives you an idea with those 2 books about potentially what my book could be. Now
Mm.
I'm intrigued. What is your book actually really about though? So it like gets you kind of that initial, I'm interested. And then the book hook or tagline is that elevator pitch. You have a second to get me into your book. The best one I ever heard was by my friend Jenny, who is published with Penguin Random House, and she pitched her book, and she swears by this hook that this is what got her the big deal was, how do you get away with murder in a town full of psychics? And I was like,
That's awesome.
that's awesome. So that's what
Amazing.
book hook is gonna. I was like, okay, this is the next app I'm doing because I'm like, that's what book hook needs to do. It needs to give that one line tagline hook that makes a person go, I have to read that. Like, that's incredible. Like, I'm so drawn in by this one sentence. So these things, again, can be so incredibly difficult to develop on your own. And so that's what these apps help you with through Parlexi. It's just a series of apps that we've generated to help you kind of make these assets. You need a book proposal. You've got all the information, but you need it put into a professional industry style. Go to Book Proposal Builder and put in all your information, and it makes a very professional book proposal for you. Yeah, I know, just like all these
I
things.
love it. Sign me up.
And we're coming up with new ideas like every day. Like we were just brainstorming a couple new ones like today, like, doing author branding. So you go in and you put some information in and it tells you, okay, here's your story as an author. Like this is what you should be putting on social media to gain a following, to like kind of promote your brand as an author, because a lot of us authors don't realize that. I didn't realize that in the beginning, but once you launch that book, you're a brand and you need to build on that brand, and you need to have a very specific brand as an author. Otherwise, if you're all over the place, you're just kind of, you're not really going to gain the traction that you want if you're splitting your mind between all these different, like my mistake, another one, psychological thriller author, and then let's just toss out a YA fiction novel, fantasy, werewolves. Why not? Because it has nothing to do with my psychological thrillers. And so it was a whole, and it's YA, so it's like a whole different target audience. I basically started as a new author with that book. And so big mistake there. But and then the biggest part of Parlexi, which came about recently, and I am so excited for this, it's going to save people so much time, is Agent Finder. So it's an app. You go in, put your genre, you put what your book's about, you put maybe some like comps in there, authors you like, and it will generate the top 10 agents that you should be querying to that are most likely going to accept your book. And so, and it'll even tell you why, because then you take that information. This is the agent. This is why I should query them. Go put it into Query Maker. And then the query will generate a very specific query to an agent, because every query needs to be very specific to an agent. And I cannot tell you how much time and energy it takes to find an agent, learn what makes them tick, what they want, how that relates to your book, and then add that into a query, send that query, wait 6 to 8 months for a no, start over. So,
Right, because you can't be querying too many at the same time, right?
no.
Yeah.
So this is like, I'm just so excited for it because it's doing everything that I always wanted as an author. And it's just that support, just being able to have a program that can really help you do it right the first time. And, again, enhancing, making life easier.
I love it. No, I am very interested in this, and I'm sure a lot of people listening would be. So is all this up and running? Can people go and sign up for Parlexi?
Yes. So you can
Yeah.
go to parlexi.com, and
Okay.
through our website, it links you out to the program that runs our apps. Now, there is a fee. So you either have to pay like per usage, or you can pay like a monthly fee to be able to use any of the apps at any time.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any cool success stories? Has anyone, you know, yet, of someone who's used it and like landed a deal or gotten that kind of thing? Do you have anything to share yet, or?
So it's still like, it's just now launching, like
Okay.
baby.
Just
I
we're
don't
like in
know
the
when you
beta.
will
We're in the
air.
beta.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
we've been in beta stage for a while now. And we actually, the meeting I had before this meeting was the meeting of like, okay, these 5 apps are ready to go. We can officially launch them on the website. So,
That's amazing.
yeah.
Well, so I mean, we'll definitely let people know about it. We'll put a link to all this, as part of this interview. And I'm going to go sign up for it because I'm personally very interested. I want to play around with it. And so the last thing I want to talk to you about is your podcast,
Oh,
which is it's called Debut Writers Podcast. Is that what it is?
yeah. So
Oh,
debuewriters.com, we launched through Substacks. So like through Substacks, you can find Debut Writers, and you can see our newsletter that we release. And through the newsletter, you have access to the YouTube channel. And so you can watch us. And then we're also in the process of translating all of that over to just a podcast too. So you can just listen to it. Um, but every season has 3 free episodes and then 2 paid episodes. And so you just have to like subscribe either to our YouTube channel or to Substacks. And the subscription is really great because we meet with a professional. So the last episode of every season is with a professional that's going to help us learn a little bit more about that space that we're talking about. And then the 4th episode is downloadable. So it's like, hey, how do what is the formula for a query? Here's just the basic outline that you can download and input your information. What are the top 10 questions you need to ask yourself when making sure that you're developing a really good story? Here's the top 10 questions. So it's kind of stuff like that. So in that subscription, you get a little bit more than just watching the first 3, which that's still pretty comprehensive. But the whole point of Debut Writers is taking somebody who says, I'd like to write a book, and us going, oh, really? Would you? Are you sure? Like, do you know what it takes? The first episode is literally, let's be realistic. Are you sure you want to write a book? So,
I like that.
talking
No, I
about
like that. I think that's important. No, you have to
yeah.
start there. I like that's cool. Yeah.
And then the series will eventually go all the way through, how to get a publisher and then marketing your book. Like, what do you do post publication? What should you be doing in all reality as the author?
That's
So
great. It sounds like a really useful resource, and it sounds like it's not it's not superficial. It sounds like it's pretty in depth.
yes, it's all of my knowledge just like imparted onto a YouTube channel with my friend Bree, who's been a longtime author, coach, and book marketer. So she's bringing all that knowledge to the table. So it's a really fun pot. I am very much I launched so my first take into podcasting was with the Pensacola Moms Collective. We did a mom podcast. And the girls that I did the podcast with just joked with me because they were like, Anne, you are always so blatantly real about everything. Like nothing is a veil, you know, there's something hiding underneath. They're like, you stick it all out there, even when it's messy and, not good. And I'm like, I can't lie. Like,
Yeah.
I am just an extremely open person. And I just feel like, why not put it all out there? Why even try to pretend it for me, all that does is make it harder for the next person because they think that unicorn, they think, oh, that unicorn, that person just got a multi-million-dollar publishing deal out of nowhere. And that's not how
Mhm.
that worked. Like,
Right.
let's be
Yeah.
real. Let's not set people up for failure or set people up to think that this is how something works when that's not really what's going on.
Mhm. Well,
Mhm.
amen to that. I mean, that's my motto too, and I think that's why I was so excited to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because the best advice is the advice that's real, right? No
Yes.
sugarcoating, no inflated expectations. Let's have sober expectations and then build something within that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think as authors too, we just naturally inflate our expectations. So
Well, it's
to
it,
kind
no,
of
it's
bring it down to reality is always good.
it's an industry that's very ripe for that, right?
Mhm.
Because, writing is it's very close, it's very personal. There's a lot of like, starry-eyed potential there.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people do exploit that dynamic, which is why I think it's so important for
Yeah.
a lot of us, for as many of us as possible, to just be very clear and real, right?
And then through debut writers, it's also kind of a segue into my book coaching that I do, where I work with authors like at whatever phase you're at. Like if you're
Yeah.
just in the beginning, I just need help knowing. Like I always joke with people, it's like my new party trick. Talk to me for 30 minutes and I can tell you what you should write a book about. It's like my new thing. Every time I meet somebody and I'm chatting with them, I'm like, you thought about writing a book? This is a great book. Let me tell you what you should write about.
That's
And
awesome.
so I should really market this a little bit better and like help people who just say, I really want to write a book. I'm just not 100% sure what the best space is for me to write this book. And I've got these, and I remember being that way. I asked my brother, I had two book ideas, and I was going to write one of these ideas this
Mm.
summer. The summer 7 years ago was my summer to write a book. I'm going to do it. What book should I write? Should I write the sci-fi apocalyptic, book, or should I write the Alabama tearjerker? And my brother was like, Alabama tearjerker all day, sis. So he's the reason I wrote A Lost Woman and
Yeah.
not some like sci-fi novel that I never would have finished, by the way, because I'm horrible at sci-fi.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But, just to sometimes have somebody sit with you and talk to you about like, hey, this is what I think the best path is for you. And being able to help them no matter where they're at. I'm really excited to continue to expand now that I'm shifting over into the editing department with Indigo, be able to expand that book coaching to really take on more clients and help more authors. Again, everything I do is all about just, I don't know, it's the psychology background, I think. You only go into psychology because you want to help people. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I mean, I'm hoping that our conversation here will help some people, because you've shared with us so many super wise and useful and time-tested insights, and I really appreciate you doing that. Um, we're gonna share all the links, et
okay.
cetera, in the comments. So if anybody wants to find out about any of Anne's many hats, Indigo River Publishing, Parlaxi, the Debut Writers Podcast, or her book coaching, we'll make sure that you can find all that.
I clearly can't say no to anything.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you. I really appreciate you being on with us today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.